Blossom Blossoms, welcome back to my channel. I'm Anna. Today I am super excited to talk about a book that I have had for such a long time. I am pretty sure that I had put this book in a book haul like last year and just haven't gotten around to reading it, but I finally did, and better late than never. I have definitely been wanting to read this book and review it for you guys because I have always loved this poet and her work is just so unique and inspiring. She's one of the first people that I discovered when I was getting into poetry and sort of an inspiration for me for why I even liked poetry at the beginning when I started this journey. And that book is Matter the Wreckage by Kaye. First of all, I love the title. I love the title like so much that it just gives that idea of like, we keep pushing on and living and learning and loving and hurting and all of this stuff that life is, we keep doing it no matter the wreckage. My little poetry senses are just like, they're just very, very happy. But even if I didn't know anything about Kaye, even if I didn't, watch all of her videos and obsess over her TED Talks or everything, just from little clues in the book, I would have known that this is definitely something that I need to read. The first little clue is that Lin-Manuel Miranda has a little statement on the back stating, in his words, that this book is an unalloyed joy from beginning to end. And I mean, what other incentive would you need to read the book? I mean, say no more. Also, this beautiful cover art is done by Anis Mogani, one of my favorite poets of all time, and also an artist. And I was just overjoyed to know that like so many of my little worlds are just colliding, and it was amazing. So before I, keep gushing and fangirling over all of these little details, let's get into the video so I can tell you more about her poetry. Okay, so let's talk about Kaye for a little bit. She is from New York City, born and raised, and you definitely can tell that from her poetry. It is a very important part of her work and her journey to poetry. New York is definitely in her poetry, in this collection. She has been performing since she was 14 years old, so prodigy, anyone? Definitely something that is in her. She's performed internationally. She's probably most well known for her TED Talk, which I will link in the description. She talks about poetry and the influence and beauty of it, but also performs a couple of her poems for the audience, and just a stunning talk all the way around. She also does a lot of collaboration with another poet named Kaye. They are not related, they are not dating, they're just really, really good friends. She and Phil do a lot of spoken word performances, a lot of writing together. And also a really cool thing that's actually currently going to be happening in January, she and Phil are going to be doing a virtual live show. I will link, if I can find the link to the actual tickets, I will, and if I can't, then I'll link their Instagrams because the link for that will be in their bio. So yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna see if I can get tickets to just watch that because I love anything that they do. And so if you're interested, get a ticket and watch them in January. For this collection specifically, this is her debut collection. So all of the poems that she has worked on and performed, a lot of them make it into this collection. If you've seen any of her performances or any of her work anywhere else, you'll probably see those poems in this book as well. This collection is composed of 60 poems and 9 parts, and we're gonna go through all 9. And I promise you, I will do my best not to make it boring. I don't think I can make it boring because her work is just, at least to me, so interesting. Also, I just wanna put a little disclaimer out there. All of the things that I'm saying about these sections and how they're ordered or whatever are based purely on my observations. So I could totally be wrong, and I would not be surprised at all if I was wrong. But that being said, this is like, as I was reading it and as I was going back over it and looking at all of the little details, I just sort of noticed little little things that link each poem in each section. And I just kind of felt like the way that she ordered them was deliberate. And I definitely think that's the case. Now, I could be wrong about how she ordered them and in my analysis or whatever, but this is just purely my observation. So do not like quote me on this. This is more of just like a guide for you if you decide to read this book. Okay, so we're gonna get into part one. I feel that she begins right off the bat with the people and places and experiences that have inspired her to write poetry. So whether that be a love that has been lost or is at least no longer alive, or the city of New York, which is just a bottomless well of lessons, life lessons. She talks about all of these things that have pulled her into this world of words and expression. One of the poems is titled Mrs. Ribiero, and it is a beautiful and inspiring and just uplifting poem about a principal from a school that she went to who was so dedicated to inspiring children, not just to learn like book learning, but also to have different experiences. I think at one point she brought a llama onto an elevator to show to bring it up to the second floor to show all of the children what a llama looked like. I mean, the dedication, we love it. And how Mrs. Ribiero has inspired her to do the same for the children that she is mentoring as she teaches them more about poetry. And it just really struck me how educators can be so inspirational. They are really the ones that make or break a person's sort of outlook on life and learning, and the difference between whether or not you love to learn or love to read even is between one good teacher and one bad teacher. And thank God for Mrs. Ribiero, because it is partly because of her that we have Sarah Kaye. Okay, part two, I feel like, is about families. She talks a lot about her parents, her brother. I always love the poems about her brother because she puts so much care into those poems out of love, I know, and also out of this desire to, I guess, encourage him or uplift him in his struggles or whatever. And I really, really liked that. You can tell that she wants to protect him, but knows that because of the world and life in general, she can't. And so this is how she expresses that and sort of copes with it at the same time and finds ways to communicate to him all of these emotions that she has. She also talks about her childhood in this section. The place they used to go for the summer called Montauk. I think it's called Montauk. I don't know how to say it right, but you can definitely correct me in the comments if I'm saying it wrong. But she describes the countryside that they used to go to and how her parents didn't want them to just grow up in the city, only knowing the city, but also to come to a different place and experience things that they would not normally experience in the city. She speaks about her childhood friends and just, I feel like this section is more about all of the innocent growing pains of getting older, all of the good parts of childhood, and sort of keeping it, at a very innocent level and lighthearted level, which leads us into the third section, which talks more about the negative side of growing pains and sort of getting older and starting to notice things, notice faults in the people that she loves, just namely that no one's perfect. And a lot of times I feel like we grow up thinking that our parents know everything or that they have it all together. And, when you get older and you begin to realize, does anybody have it all together? It's just an experience that we all have to go through. She also begins to learn harder lessons about love and relationships and navigating how to deal with those. She just starts seeing life for what it is. And it's no less beautiful, but it definitely requires like a reset in your mind of like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Okay, like having to take that reality in. One of the poems in this section that stood out to me was called Forest Fires. It is definitely about coping with grief. Almost before the grief is necessary, or like maybe in preparation for a full grief. Her grandmother is sick and she gets called home, and her father deals with his grief in a certain way and she deals with her grief in a certain way. But also it is the poem is in I don't know if it's juxtaposition or like adjacent to this reality that she was in California, I think it was in California, before she got the call, and out in the woods trekking and hiking and having adventures. And when she gets back to where her family is, the news breaks that the place where she was is now on fire, and how that could have been either her end or a serious harm and danger to her, and how life just kind of throws these things together, and it's not good or bad, because no one wants to be called home because their grandmother is sick, but that kind of saved her life. And just the reality, and like, it is what it is of it all, if that makes sense. Yeah, but this section, she definitely adds a lot more conflict and like the introduction of family problems. I think it is in this section that we have the poem called Something We Don't Talk About, Part 1. I think that is about her parents. And if it's not about her parents, it's definitely about a couple going through a hard time and sort of witnessing that. So Part 4 is about travel, because she, as you know, has traveled all over the world and done performances and had different experiences and adventures, basically living her best life. And so this section talks about all of those, well, not all of them, but the two places I feel like that have stood out the most for her. The first being South Africa. She writes a poem about a man named Noor, and how he used to live in this part of South Africa that was very diverse, people from all walks of life, and he owns 50 birds. It was just, I guess, her reminiscing through him about all of the ways that they lived, together. There was just so many different foods and sounds and people, and it was beautiful. It was like a beautiful melting pot. And then apartheid happened, and he had to move because he wasn't white. And the grief of losing a home, of a community, of knowing that things are never going to get back to the way that they used to be. His birds, he lets them go. And he expects at least some of them to return back to him, because I guess that's what birds do. I don't know a lot about birds, but none of them do. And now it's not only the changes, but now the loneliness that hits him. And one day he goes back to the place that he used to live, and that's where the birds went. They went home. That's the home that they know. And it was just this sad reality that there are things in life that alter the course of our personal histories, and it is not easy to cope with. I think COVID will be that for a lot of us. Just this whole year will be sort of one of those moments in our lives where it changes everything and we can't go back. The second place that she talks about is India. So India, of course, is a beautiful country, but it is hot, and she talks about the heat, and it is isolating even when you were with other people because it's too hot to touch anybody. But she also weaves in the concept of homesickness, of missing the people that she loves and not being able to see them. That's the reality of travel, and when you're touring, or you're away from home for a long period of time, it's hard to not be around the people that you love all the time. So yeah, the rest of the section is a lot more about homesickness and wanting to be with the person that she loves, and using her memories of that person to sort of get her through her time away from them. Part 5 is about, well, I've dubbed it the confusion of love and life. I could totally be wrong, but that's sort of the gist that I got from this section. This is where the Something We Don't Talk About poem Part 2 comes in, and whereas Part 1 was about somebody else, Part 2 is now about her and her relationship struggles. It's interesting that she has split those two poems into two different sections. I think because maybe Part 5 speaks more about her experiences instead of somebody else's experiences. She also has a poem called Scissors, in which this devastating line appears that she doesn't always recognize her own weaponry. Mind blown. Yeah, I was definitely not okay after reading that, because I was like, wow, do I recognize my own weaponry? Yeah, definitely gave me something to think about, which I love. So this section I feel like has a lot of like really amazing like lines within the poems that like really stand out to me. There's one called Postcards, which is definitely an amazing poem, like definitely one that I remember, in which she says that practice doesn't make perfect. Like, you know, we always say, you know, oh, if you're not good at something, just practice makes perfect. She disagrees. She says practice makes permanent, which is, I feel, more accurate. So I guess her argument is that if you practice something wrong for a long time, you're going to keep doing it wrong. It's not perfect, it's just the wrong way that you've done it. And so it's now, depending on what it is, permanent. And I was just like, wow, that's actually true. Also, the end of this poem, she turns the focus back on herself and just sort of admits that she doesn't know a lot about life or love, but she's learning. And like, isn't that the most important part? You know, we can't know everything about life or love. In fact, percentage-wise, we probably know like less than we think we do, but we are always learning, and we are always capable of learning more and doing better and not making the same mistakes. Okay, part 6. I think this is about identity and reminiscing about lost loves. So loves that are not current or are not impending. Impending makes it sound like it's gonna be a bad thing, but I can't think of another word for it at the moment. I really like this section because I think it is set up brilliantly. She starts with this poem called Extended Development, and I think it sets the tone for all of the other poems in this section, because she has a couple lines that are talking about embracing things and letting things go, whether that be people or places or physical items. Embracing them, having them for a time, and then being able to let them go is a very hard process, because especially when it comes to people and you get very attached emotionally, physically, intimately, whatever the case may be, it is very hard to let them go because you've dedicated at least a section or part of your life to them, and having to not have them in your life anymore is a devastating blow. And so the rest of her poems are really talking about the people and the places that she has had to let go and how she deals with that, how she copes with it, and just the difficulty of it all, but really talking about the lessons that she's learned from those experiences. Also, the poem Flight, which is in this section, is written like a picture painting, I wrote down. And it reminds me of the book that I just reviewed in my last video by Ribiero, in which I described as being able to see as I'm reading what he's describing, and it's painting itself in my mind. And that happened again for this poem. And so I thought I'd bring that up because I always love when that happens. Part 7, I feel, is about navigating the world in general, not like travel, but like just life experiences. She starts with the poem called B, which is about her future daughter. This is one that she performed for her TED Talk, so when I do link that video, you'll be able to see her perform it if you haven't already. She also includes in this section negative experiences that she's had with guys. Yeah, the first one being in school with when they were children, and then the second one being when she's grown and a man threw an egg at her. Sir? Why? Negative experiences with people are just parts of life that we all have to navigate one way or another. She also has a poem called Accidents, in which she describes all of these situations or events or like memories that she's had as accidents, all of the life accidents that are really just life, and trying to reset her mind to think of them not as accidents but as just parts of life. The line that really stood out to me in this one is, someone placed the panic button awfully close to the ignition, and I was like, relate. But I really liked that section. We're definitely getting more into the nitty-gritty stuff of life and all of that jazz. Part 8 is definitely about love, but this time we're getting into the more positive parts about love. Crushes, budding loves, new relationships, when everything feels right with the world. Although she does start it off with a poem that is a little sad called Peacocks, in which she talks about a man who approaches her in India when she's in India and asks her to write a love letter for the woman that he loves, but that he can't either marry or be with because he's already arranged to be married to somebody else, and so he wants to give this letter to the woman that he actually loves, I guess is something to remember him by. And she writes the letter for him, and as she's hearing it being read back, she feels like the words are inadequate for this woman who is not going to be able to be with the man that she loves. And it's tragic, but also she has a very important lesson or just outlook on it when the translator tells her that, oh, he's never going to marry her. And she's like, yes, that's true, but he can still love her. And sometimes in situations like that, love will have to be enough, because society and social hierarchies and structures, as much as we like to think that love can conquer all, those things really do get in the way. And sometimes love in and of itself just has to be enough. This section focuses a lot on her relationships, her past experiences of budding loves and crushes and stuff, and it's very sweet, and I'm sure very relatable. I love the one where she talks about her crush, just like the experience of having a crush and like how stressful it is. Definitely can relate to that. Yeah. Section 9 is I've dubbed conclusions and inclusions. I feel like she has included a lot of different little maybe side notes or things that she wanted to include but wasn't able to fit them into other sections of the collection. Ghost Ship is, I think, the first poem in this collection in which she talks about her brother, and I think to her brother, encouraging him in his struggles and sort of just encouraging him to open up and live life and find things that make him happy. The poem Lightning blew my mind because I've recently gotten really into Sylvia Plath's poetry, and this sort of indirectly has to do with her. So Sylvia Plath was married to this man named Ted Hughes, and while they were married, Ted had an affair with Assia Weevil. I think I'm saying that right, but I'm not sure. So Assia and Ted had an affair, and Assia was also married to a man named David. And when everything hit the fan, it really damaged both relationships. And I'm sure that a lot of you know that Sylvia Plath died tragically. She committed suicide. And after she was dead, 2 days after, Assia moved into the house and took on the wifely duties of mother and wife. I'm sure that she thought that everything was going to be okay now and that life would continue. But as we know, for situations like that, affairs are always sort of inevitable again. And Ted, of course, had another affair which devastated Assia, and she ended up committing suicide much in the same way that Sylvia did. The poem is really sort of, I guess, Sarah's take on people who are, and this is a quote, born chasing destruction, and just how there are people sometimes who either attract those kind of situations or always find themselves in situations in which it is potentially either self-destructive or just destructive to people around them. It's very tragic, and a lot of times it has to do with upbringing and background and a lot of different things that, you know, play into the reasons why people find themselves in those situations. Sarah said that in her explanation for the poem, she said that Assia would always attribute her struggles, at least once she was married to Ted, to Sylvia, and that she felt like Sylvia was haunting her. She ultimately gave that as the reason that drove her to do what she did. And Sarah has this line in her poem where she talks and she asks if when Assia was reading all of Sylvia's words, if she heard them in her voice. I was just like, oh God. Also in this section, the poem called The Type, which is another very popular poem by Sarah. She also performs that in her TED Talk. And just, I guess, really good advice, or like a really good outlook for women to have as they go through the world and go through, you know, their careers or, you know, their lives, their love lives. Red flags to look for in their partners, and renewed self-worth of like, if you are the type of woman to do this, people will treat you this way. This is how you have to reevaluate your worth in your relationships, romantic, platonic, work relationships, anything like that. This is how you have to reevaluate your worth. And lastly, the poem In the Event of an Emergency is what I feel is a poet's will. Here is what to do with all of the the artistic, creative, poetic things of me should an emergency be my end. It's a really good way to end a collection, especially a debut collection, but also it makes you think about all of the I guess, abstract parts of your life and how sometimes it's hard to share them when you're alive. So I guess thinking about it in like, if this is the last thing that I have to offer people, this is how I want it to be distributed, if that makes sense, or like shared. Definitely food for thought. Okay, we have made it through all 9 sections. If you have made it to this far in the video, props to you, because I know it's taken a while, but I really feel like it's important to go through all 9 sections. I think if you haven't read this book, it will help you to sort of guide you and like give you, at least I hope, a better way of understanding it. And then if you have read this book, I hope this will make you go back and be like, oh yeah, I do see how that can relate to this. I hope that that's done that for you. I also want to talk about some more physical aspects of the book. She starts every section off with something that looks like this, with little pictures that I feel are pointing to specific poems or lines. Now, I have tried to go through all of them and find what poem they relate to. And for part 1, I did. I think I got all of them, but as it went on, it got harder. I don't know if this is like a puzzle or like a code, but it definitely got harder for me to find all of the little connections. It's probably definitely because I'm not smart enough for it, but it was really fun to try anyways. And it also just, I guess it made me pay more attention to the poetry, because then I went looking for the connections, and it was always really satisfying when I was like, oh, there it is. There's where the picture related to the poem. Also want to give credit to the artist. So the artist's name is Sophia Janowitz, and she is the one responsible for all the artwork in the book. Anis Mogani did the cover, but Sophia did all of the artwork in the book, and really, really nice. Yeah, I really liked how it made me pay more attention. I also want to talk more about Sarah Kaye's style of writing. She has a very unique style in that it is, I feel, a really good blend of narrative poetry and traditional poetry. She is able to incorporate storytelling into her poetry in a way that makes it feel like prose sometimes, but it's not prose. It still feels like poetry, but yet it reads so easily, and it's so nice to not have to sometimes decode or I guess crack the mystery of the poem, because sometimes poems can be quite cryptic and they're fun to read and they can be deep, but also poems can be just expressive of the world as it is. And I feel like that's what Sarah does really well with her poetry, is she is just telling you what her world is like and how she goes through it. And it is poetic, but it is also very concrete, if that makes sense. So if you are worried about reading a book that is over 130 pages of poetry, don't be, because it won't feel like that. It will definitely feel, as Lin-Manuel Miranda said, an unalloyed joy from beginning to end. I'll never get over that. So I hope that I have inspired you to read this or reread it if you have already. I will put all of Sarah Kaye's information down in the description. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram if you're interested in any of the written reviews that I do, or just my own poetry, or if you're weirdly interested in the random stuff that goes on in my life. I can't imagine why you would be, but hey, you know, whatever floats your boat. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Christmas, Hanukkah, however you choose to celebrate the holidays, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.